What do you think about this new proposal?
I'm not sure. It seems a bit rushed, don't you think?
I have considered your proposal carefully.
And what is your decision?
Well, I think it's important to keep an open mind about these things.
Yeah, I agree, but sometimes it's hard to see things from a different perspective.
Yeah.
I'm falling! Oh my God.
I told them that we needed to have a meeting to discuss the new policies. And what did they say about that?
She's working. That's good.
So that's how I ended up here. It's a long story, but worth telling.
I really appreciate you both meeting with me today. Yes, and
Of course, we're happy to discuss this further.
Sometimes it's difficult to get to the truth, but we must persevere for justice.
I think that this one is very interesting.
Yes, but what about the color?
Did you get everything from the market?
Yes, I think so. The vegetables look very fresh today.
The day began with a softness that hid the storm beneath. Dawn light crept across the worn wooden walls of their small home, touching the framed photographs, the patched curtains, the sleeping figure of Nhat. She stirred lightly in her bed, her hand clutching the blanket, her brow furrowed in thought even before her eyes opened. Today was different. Today, there was a choice to be made. Her mother had already risen. She stood at the stove, the scent of rice porridge filling the small room, steam rising in curls that mingled with the cool morning air. Her hands moved quickly, but her mind was elsewhere. She knew her daughter had been waiting for this day, waiting for the doctors who had finally come to the village. A rare opportunity, a chance to check her health without having to travel far and pay heavily. When Nhat came to the table, her face pale but hopeful, she placed her hand gently on her mother's arm. "Mother, today I must go to the clinic. The doctors are here and I cannot miss this chance. But what about the work at Uncle's house? He asked us to come. We gave our word." Her mother smiled faintly, the lines around her eyes deepening with both kindness and fatigue. "Then you must go, child. Your health is worth more than any broom or rag. I will go in your place. Let me take this burden, just for today." Nhat hesitated, guilt flickering in her chest. "But mother, it will be hard for you. And uncle, he expects me, not you." Her mother shook her head firmly, her voice steady. "Work is work. A floor does not care who sweeps it. What matters is that the promise is kept. Go see the doctors. Let me handle the rest." At that moment, the decision was sealed. Nhat bowed her head in gratitude, though unease lingered in her heart. She gathered her things, her worn scarf, her small purse, a notebook, and pressed her mother's hand before leaving. "Be careful, Mother. Don't overwork yourself. I'll return soon." After she left, the house felt emptier, quieter. The mother sighed, tying her hair back with a faded ribbon. She looked around the room, at the walls that had seen decades of hardship and endurance, and whispered, "For you, my daughter, I would carry twice this weight." But she knew she would not walk alone. There was another figure to call upon, another heart to test. She stepped out into the morning, the sky still gray with lingering clouds, and made her way down the path toward the house of her daughter's mother-in-law. The older woman, stern yet not unkind, was already awake, sweeping the yard. When she saw Sinnhat's mother approaching, she leaned on her broom. "So early? What brings you here?" With humility, she explained the situation. Her daughter needed to see the doctors, and someone must take her place at Uncle's house. She added softly, "Would you come with me? Together, we can finish the work quickly." For a moment, the mother-in-law frowned, considering. She had intended to join her daughter-in-law, but upon hearing the reason, her face softened. "Health first. You are right. Let her go. Very well. I will come with you." Relief washed over Sinnhat's mother. Together, the two women prepared themselves for the day's labor. Before leaving, they returned briefly to the small home, where Sinnhat's little daughter stood in the doorway, clutching a small doll. "Grandmother, where are you going?" the child asked, her eyes wide. Both women knelt before her, their voices gentle but firm. "Stay home, little one. Lock the doors. Be careful. We will return before evening. You must be brave." The child nodded solemnly, too young to understand the weight of responsibility, yet old enough to sense the seriousness in their tone. She watched them go, the figures of her two grandmothers fading into the morning mist. The road to Uncle's house was long, winding through fields still wet from last night's rain. Their shoes sank into the mud, and each step was an effort. Yet they pressed on, their breaths visible in the cool air, their silence filled with unspoken thoughts. For Sinnhat's mother, the silence was heavy. She wondered if she was strong enough, if her body could endure the strain. She thought of her daughter, sitting in a clinic, waiting for her name to be called, her heart pounding with fear and hope. She prayed silently that the doctors would bring good news. At last, they arrived. Uncle's house stood large and imposing at the edge of the village, its courtyard cluttered with tools and furniture. He greeted them with surprise, his brows lifting when he saw not Sinnhat, but her mother. "She could not come?" he asked. "She had to see the doctors," the mother replied steadily. "I came in her place. We promised you, and I will not break that promise." Uncle hesitated, then nodded. "Very well. Work is work, and hands are hands. Come in." And so, the day's labor began. Inside, the house smelled of dust and dampness, the air thick with neglect. Cobwebs clung to the corners, dirt lay heavy on the floors, and every surface begged for care. Sinnhat's mother took up the broom, sweeping with deliberate strokes, her back bent, but her spirit unbroken. Beside her, the mother-in-law wrung a rag in a bucket of soapy water and set to scrubbing the floors. They worked in silence at first, the rhythm of their labor filling the room, yet beneath the surface, emotions stirred. For the mother, it was duty and love that drove her. For the mother-in-law, it was pride and a subtle watchfulness, her eyes darting occasionally toward her companion. The minutes turned into hours. Dust gave way to clarity, grime to shine. And though sweat beaded their brows and their arms ached, there was a quiet dignity in their effort. Each sweep of the broom, each stroke of the rag was more than cleaning. It was devotion, sacrifice, the silent language of mothers. Outside, the sky shifted, clouds parting briefly to let sunlight stream through the windows. It lit the faces of the two women, one lined with years of struggle, the other carved by age and suspicion. For a fleeting moment, they seemed united, their work binding them together. But shadows lingered, waiting, and soon they would stir. The house had grown warmer as the day advanced, the damp morning air replaced by the heaviness of noon. The two women worked side by side, their bodies weary but unwilling to stop. Dust clung to their hair, streaks of sweat cut across their temples, yet still they pressed on. For Sinnhat's mother, each sweep of the broom was a vow, each movement an act of love for the daughter who now sat in some clinic waiting for her turn to be examined. For the mother-in-law, each stroke of the rag was less about cleanliness and more about guarding appearances, making sure their family's word was honored. The landlord, the uncle they called him, moved in and out of the rooms, occasionally pausing to watch. He was a man accustomed to solitude, his home carrying the weight of years with little care. The arrival of the two women had transformed the silence into something alive. The scrape of buckets, the swish of water across the floor, the steady beat of labor echoing in the halls. Then it happened. Sinnhat's mother, her knees aching from hours of sweeping, rose too quickly. Her foot slipped on a wet patch of floor, and with a sharp gasp, she toppled backward. The broom clattered against the wall, her body folding under its own weight as pain shot up her leg. The sound startled the house. The landlord, hearing the crash, rushed forward with urgency. "Madam!" he exclaimed, his hands reaching to lift her before she could gather herself. His grip was firm, his voice heavy with concern. "Are you hurt? Let me help you." The world tilted for her, not from the fall, but from the sudden closeness of a man not her kin. His hand steadied her elbow, his face hovered too near. Her cheeks burned with embarrassment, but she forced a smile. "I am fine, truly, just a clumsy slip. Please do not trouble yourself." But trouble had already arrived. From across the room, the mother-in-law froze, the rag dripping suds onto the floor forgotten. Her eyes narrowed, her lips pressed into a thin line. She saw not an accident, but something else. Something she chose to interpret through the lens of suspicion. To her, the sight of her daughter-in-law's mother in the arms of another man, even briefly, even innocently, was an insult, a humiliation that scratched at her pride. Her silence was louder than words. She turned back to her scrubbing, her strokes now sharp and punishing, her shoulders stiff. Not once did she glance again at the scene, yet her mind replayed it endlessly. The whisper of jealousy, irrational and poisonous, coiled inside her chest. Sinnhat's mother, sensing the shift, pulled quickly away from the landlord's hands, bowing her head. "Thank you, uncle, but I can manage. Please forgive my clumsiness." The man nodded, returning to his tasks with little thought, but the air had changed. It was thicker, colder. A shadow had crept in, unseen but undeniable. For the rest of the afternoon, the two women worked in strained silence. The mother-in-law spoke little, her eyes never softening, her tone clipped whenever she did address her companion. Every instruction felt like a reprimand, every glance like an accusation. Sinnhat's mother tried to bridge the gap. She offered small smiles, gentle words, even tried to share stories from her youth to lighten the mood. But the other woman remained cold, her responses short, her mind fixed on the image that had branded itself into her thoughts. By the time the work was done, the house gleamed. Dust was banished, the air smelled of soap and effort, and the landlord thanked them both with polite words. Yet for the mother-in-law, gratitude meant little. She gathered her things quickly, eager to leave, her back turned even as her companion attempted one last farewell. The walk home was no easier. The road stretched long beneath the dimming sky. But while the distance was the same, the silence between them had grown immeasurable. The mother-in-law walked fast, her steps sharp, her gaze fixed forward. Behind her, Sinnhat's mother followed slowly, her legs tired, her spirit heavier than her body. Each time she tried to speak, to explain, to ask if something was wrong, the words withered in the air, met only with indifference. The elder woman did not slow, did not answer, did not offer a hand when her companion stumbled slightly on the uneven road. It was as though a wall had risen between them, built not from stone, but from misunderstanding and wounded pride. By the time they reached the village, night had begun to gather. The mother-in-law disappeared into her own home without so much as a farewell, leaving Sinnhat's mother standing in the street, weary and bewildered. She turned toward her own house, her heart heavy with questions. Had she truly done something wrong? Was her fall a simple accident, now seen as something shameful? She thought of her daughter, of what she would say, and felt a pang of fear. Perhaps this small moment, this tiny misunderstanding, could ripple into something greater. Inside her chest, a knot tightened, and as she reached the doorway of her own home, she whispered to herself, "Let this pass like the wind. Let it not grow into a storm." But storms have a way of finding cracks, and once suspicion is planted, it rarely dies quietly. Evening settled over the village like a heavy quilt, stitched with the golden threads of lantern light and the deep blue patches of gathering night. The hum of insects rose from the fields, a steady chorus that filled the silence of narrow roads. Inside one modest home, the air was heavy with anticipation, with questions waiting to be asked and answers too fragile to be spoken. Sinnhat's mother sat near the doorway, her body aching from the day's labor, her heart aching even more from the coldness she had endured. She held her hands in her lap, studying the small scratches across her knuckles, remnants of her fall. Every now and then she would glance down the path as though her eyes could summon her daughter back sooner. And then, finally, she came. Nhat appeared at the end of the road, her figure small against the dimming sky, her steps slow yet purposeful. She carried a small bag of medicine tucked carefully under her arm and a bundle of flowers held delicately in her hand. The sight was almost dreamlike, youth carrying hope, color carrying promise. For a brief moment, the mother's heart lifted, the heaviness dissolving into relief. When Nhat stepped inside, her face flushed from the walk. She smiled gently. "Mother, I am back. The doctors were kind. They gave me these medicines and said with care, I will be strong again." She placed the bag down with a reverence, as though it contained her future. Then, holding out the flowers, she added, "And these, they reminded me of you. I wanted our home to be bright." The mother took the flowers, her eyes misting. She inhaled their fresh scent, but the sweetness was tinged with sorrow. Setting them gently in a vase, she turned to her daughter, her voice soft but trembling. "Child, I must tell you something. Today was not as simple as it seemed." So she began. Her words poured out slowly at first, halting with hesitation. She told of the work, of the dust and the grime, of the effort they gave together. She spoke of her clumsy fall, the landlord's startled rush to help, the brief touch of his hand steadying her. And she spoke of the eyes that had seen it, eyes that turned cold, lips that pressed into silence, steps that hurried away without kindness. "She thought I meant something by it," the mother whispered, shame coloring her cheeks. "Your mother-in-law?" She saw only scandal where there was none. Since then, she has not looked at me with warmth. "I fear I have brought shame upon you, upon us." Nhat listened carefully, her brow furrowing, her hands clenched in her lap. For a moment, she said nothing, letting the story settle in the air between them like dust after a storm. Then she reached for her mother's hands, holding them tight. "No, Mother, this is nothing but a misunderstanding. I know your heart. You would never do such a thing. And if she believes otherwise, then it is her shadow, not your fault." Her voice was calm, but inside her, a fire sparked. She would not allow a single accident to drive wedges between the people she loved most. The mother shook her head, tears glimmering in her eyes. Still, the hurt was real. I felt her anger. It cut me deeper than the fall itself. "Then we must face it," Nhat said firmly. "We must clear the air before silence grows into poison." The next morning, as the sun broke over the hills, Nhat prepared herself. She placed the flowers she had bought into a fresh vase, their petals now fully open, brightening the small home. She brewed tea with care, her movement steady, purposeful. When her mother-in-law arrived, as she always did, she greeted her with warmth, bowing respectfully. The older woman entered, her expression stern, her steps brisk. She did not sit immediately, nor did her eyes linger on the flowers. Instead, she cast a brief, guarded glance towards Nhat's mother, who sat quietly in the corner. The air thickened instantly. It was Nhat who broke it. "Mother," she began gently, "I have heard what happened yesterday. My own mother told me everything, the fall, the accident, the help she received, and I know you saw something that troubled you. But I ask you, please, look again with clearer eyes. What you thought you saw was not what truly happened." The older woman's lips tightened. "I know what I saw. A woman does not cling to a man unless she seeks something." The words cut deep, but before her own mother could protest, Nhat spoke again, her voice steady, her gaze unwavering. "She did not cling. She stumbled. She fell, and someone reached to help her. Nothing more. If we let suspicion guide us, then every kindness becomes sin. Every accident becomes shame. But that is not justice, and it is not truth." Silence followed, thick and uncomfortable. The mother-in-law shifted, her hands twisting in her lap, her pride warring with reason. At last, she exhaled, long and heavy. "Perhaps," she admitted slowly, "I was too quick to judge. Perhaps I saw what was not there. My heart was restless, and I let it cloud my mind." The words were not quite an apology, but they cracked open the door. Nhat's mother, tears slipping silently down her cheeks, bowed her head. "I only wished to honor my daughter's promise. I meant no harm. If I gave offense, I beg your pardon." The older woman looked at her for a long moment, then sighed. "Let it be, then. The matter is finished." But Nhat was not finished. She leaned forward, her voice low but resolute. "Let us promise each other something today. No more shadows. No more silence. If doubt comes, let us speak, not assume. If fear arises, let us share it, not bury it. We are family, and family must stand together, or else we will fall apart." Something in her words softened the room. The tension eased, the air lightened. The older woman nodded once, her gaze shifting away as though ashamed of her own weakness. And with that, the storm began to pass. Life returned to its rhythms. Together, mother and daughter went to the garden, where rows of vegetables lay battered from recent rains. They knelt side by side, pulling out wilted stalks, pressing new seeds into the damp earth. The soil clung to their fingers, cool and forgiving, as though nature itself offered them a fresh start. Inside, the flowers brightened the table, their colors a reminder that beauty could grow even from brokenness. Nhat arranged them carefully, humming softly, her voice weaving hope into the quiet walls of their home. And yet, though peace returned, the lesson lingered. How easily trust could fracture, how swiftly suspicion could wound. It was a reminder carved into all their hearts that family required not only love, but also patience, forgiveness, and the courage to believe in one another. As the sun set over the village, casting long shadows across the garden, Nhat stood between her two mothers. She held one hand in each of theirs, binding them together with the simple strength of her presence. And in that moment, they were not rivals, not strangers bound by circumstance, but family, fragile, imperfect, yet still holding on. The storm had come, the storm had passed, and in its wake, life continued, quieter, wiser, and perhaps just a little stronger.